What is going on, guys? This is Gene Jensen, and today I want to talk to you about the baits that you might want to give a try in the month of June. All right, so first of all, before I get started on the baits, let's talk about what's going on in the month of June. So we got solid post spawn. Just about everything's done spawning except for the bluegill. Bluegill are still going at it. If you're interested in the baits for that, that was last month's video. But bluegill are spawning, and the big bass are going to be around the bluegill, but most of the big ones are going to be moving offshore eventually and starting to get out on those long points and those humps and offshore structure, rocks, whatever else, and just they're out there to ambush bait fish as they swim by, as the shad swim by, as whatever other bait fish you have. You know, the bluegill will get done spawning, they'll move out to the rocks and the hard spots, and the bass will be there feeding. So again, the bass are going to be around their food, and that's kind of where we want to find them. And this is the baits that I want to use to catch them. First of all, probably the one I use the most, for most of the summer anyway, is a Texas rig. Okay, so basically all a Texas rig is it's a bullet weight, and this is one I've cut off my rod, but it's all rigged up anyway. It's a sinker, a hook, and a big worm. And that big worm is key. I usually go to a 9, 10, 11. I've even fished 14-inch worms in the summertime, June, July, August, and into September here in the South. And it is a lot of fun. But a Texas rigged big worm, I'm getting away from the creature baits that I was using last month and the month before and the month before that, and getting into those worms and dragging them real slow on the bottom and getting bit by some really, really big fish. 3/8 half-ounce sinker. The rod that I'd be using is a 7'3" medium heavy, if I find that I'm not getting a good hook penetration or something like that, I might bump up to a heavy power rod, but mostly a 7'3" medium heavy, 20-pound test fluorocarbon line, because you want it to be able to sink, stay down there, not float up a whole lot. You want to stay in contact with that hard bottom. And then an 8:3-to-1 gear ratio reel. So something similar to this one right here. This is another one I've got rigged up, but that's a swinging head that I'm trying that I've never tried before. But anyway, so just a 8:3-to-1 gear ratio reel, or 8 whatever, an 8-speed reel. This is an Inception slide. A 7'3-to-1. This is on a heavy or medium heavy, and have a whole lot of fun. The biggest thing to remember with a Texas rig is when they bite, let them take it for a second till you feel them good, and then hammer it. Set the hook good and hard. Don't drop it to a slack line and slack line set it, but just pull it back and set really hard. So that's the Texas rig. So another one of my favorite things to do when it starts to get hot and stuff like that, especially in lakes that have grass or have reasons for the bass to stay shallow, so grass or current, along rivers and things like that, is some type of a topwater. And the one I chose to talk about this month is a buzzbait. This is a toad toter by Greenfish Tackle. I put a Zoom horny toad on it, and the reason I love a toad toter is you can skip this sucker if you're on a lake that has a lot of boat docks and stuff like that. With a little bit of practice, you can learn how to skip the buzzbait up underneath those boat docks. Same thing with the grass. You can get it through the grass a whole lot easier with that weight covered up. It makes a big difference. Now, this one's been sitting in the bottom of my kayak for about 2 months, and so it's a little dirty. But what I'm going to throw that on is I throw mine on fluorocarbon. I know fluorocarbon sinks and stuff like that, but when I'm fishing a buzzbait, I typically hold my rod up pretty high, and most of that line is out of the water, and it's not going to pull that topwater down. That's the only topwater bait that I would throw with fluorocarbon line. I also might throw it on braid, but typically I don't. I know a lot of people do. And braid works just fine too. So, but the rod, medium heavy, fast rod, medium heavy, moderate rod, like a chatter crank rod from 13 Fishing, something like that. But mostly I usually throw mine on something just like the one with the Texas rig, a 7'3" medium heavy, and I'm just fine. Love a buzzbait. Trailers, the different trailers that I might use is like a Zoom Fat Albert grub, a horny toad, and a paddle tail. Those are the only 3 that I might throw on there. If you notice, I don't like skirts. I usually rip the skirts off of the buzzbaits. I throw a 3/8 ounce buzzbait or a 1/2 ounce, and I make sure that it's got a big old honking blade. Okay, I don't want one of those small blades. I want to be able to throw it up there, up against the bank, and slow roll it off. Now, what I'm going to be doing during this video is up here, you'll see a bunch of, you'll see the little icon for the cards. That's a link to all the videos about all these baits that I've produced. So, my Buzzbait video, my old one, is one of the best ones I've ever produced. It's one you guys are gonna want to go see. But anyway, it's you just throw it up against the bank and you slow roll it off. Or you throw it along the cover and you slow roll it off. It's such a blast. All right, so I know I talked about a lot of offshore stuff this time of the year. So June is when they start to get offshore, and you start to catch them on a lot of lakes, on ledges and on road beds and on humps and rocks and anything that's offshore. Depending on the clarity is how deep they'll be, you know, at 8, 10, 12, 14, 20, 25. It doesn't matter. It just depends on where the bait fish are, is where the bass are. But I love to throw a Carolina rig. Okay, and I've been throwing one for years and years, but I've kind of settled on some favorite soft plastics to put on a Carolina rig. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about what rod I'm going to throw it on. I'm going to throw it on a 7'6", which I'm using as a jig rod right now, but a 7'6" medium heavy, again with a high speed reel, an 8:3-to-1 gear ratio reel or an 8-speed reel. And this is the G2 from that Gerald Swindle's name is on it, and this is also the Meta rod. This is a Gerald Swindle rod, but a 7'6" medium heavy is great, because what happens is you get those Carolina rigs, you make those long casts, you got the sinker way up front, the hook way behind it, and to get the hook set, you've got to really take up a bunch of line on that hook set. So a 7'6" rod is perfect, and it's also really good for the cast. And like I said, I'm leaving links up here to the videos on how to fish them and all the details. But you throw it out, and when you set the hook, you always want to swing to the side and set it pretty hard. And so the line I'm going to use is either between 15 and 20 pound test fluorocarbon. You want that thing to sink. I know people talk about the Carolina floating up and all that other, you want it to float up. Well, it's going to float up the way you're dragging it. And I talk about that in the video. But anyway, so my favorite baits are baits that don't have a lot of action. A trick worm, or like this one, a Magnum trick worm. I love the big fat Magnum trick worms. I used to throw a regular trick worm all the time. And I got bit a lot, but the big ones always seem to like the big Magnum trick worm or the Magnum finesse worm. But I don't want one that has a lot of action. And another good one is a Cinco, believe it or not, or some type of or Cinco style bait. What I think it is I think it's just the fact that it has very little action. It just looks like it's just something swimming and dying in the water, and they come unglued. But like I said, when you feel that bite, you want to reel into them and you want to set the hook pretty hard. Sometimes they tend to take a Carolina rig kind of deep, so have a pair of pliers handy, and dude, go have fun with it. It's a blast. All right, let's grab the next one. So the next one is kind of, well, it's two rigs. It's two rigs instead of one, because I'm going to go back and forth between the two. But you need to have some type of a finesse something, a finesse rod, a medium power spinning rod, a good reel. This is the new Axiom from 13 Fishing. But it's, a 6'9", 7-foot medium with some light line. What I do is I do a 20-pound test braid. This is Seagar high-vis braid, which on those tough bites, you want to be able to see that line move even the slightest amount. Then I attached a long fluorocarbon leader, usually 8 or 10 pound test fluorocarbon, and I attach it with an FG knot. And now the rig itself, I'm either going to do a shaky head with a trick worm or a finesse worm, something like a 1/4 ounce or lighter. Usually I throw an 1/8 ounce shaky head, or a 1/10 ounce Ned rig. So those are the two I go back and forth from. If I'm fishing a lot of cover, brush piles, a lot of rock piles and that kind of stuff, I'm throwing a shaky head. I can keep it unsnagged better than I can a Ned rig. I don't like the weedless Ned rig because I miss way too many hook sets. I lose too many fish on a weedless Ned rig. So I pick my poison. Depending on what I'm casting to. If it's flat bottom and stuff like this, and not a whole lot of snags and things like that, I'm going to throw a Ned rig. And I fish a Ned rig by just, slowly reeling it and raising it, and letting it fall back down on a tight line. So it's coming up and it's going back down. But with a shaky head, I'm going to be a little bit more, I'm going to leave it in one spot a little bit more and shake it more and drag it and shake it and stuff like that. But you've got to have a finesse rod on the boat this time of the year, or you are going to have some really, really tough days trying to beat them with big baits. But that's it. That's the baits, the main baits that I'm going to have tied on in June. Of course, I always experiment with other stuff, and we'll talk about that in the July video. But like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water. Go out and catch some fish, and have a great day. We'll see you.